going to jump into, I want to jump into our panel pretty quickly, but I just want to tell you that I did print out, I was going to spend a little bit of time reminding us who we are as a cohort, but I think in lieu of doing that, because I really do want to hear from our panelists, I'm just going to point to the handout that are on your tables, and I have one for each of you, that have our current mission, vision, and goals, and on the back is a little bit about our history. The cohort was formed in 2017 during the first Trump administration, and it was formed out of interviews, in-depth interviews that Reverend Penny and probably some others here, this was before my time, had with local faith leaders to find out what are the challenges, what are kind of holding you back from being a more effective prophetic voice in the community. And out of those common challenges that they heard, they developed goals for our cohort. So the cohort and you can read those on the back. So we have been focused on building our connections as faith leaders across our many diverse identities and backgrounds, and forming ourselves through education and through relationship building and skill building, as well as sort of lifting up the voices of the most impacted in all the platforms we serve and showing up in the wider community. Over the 8 years that we've been together, we really have built trust and built networks, which we realized during COVID when people were coming to us and saying, hey, you're this network of faith leaders, can you hold this Zoom meeting so we can get out critical health information, that kind of thing. And then with this Trump administration part 2, we held that Martin Luther King Day event. It was quite easy for us actually to pull together over 30 organizations because we have built these relationships over the past 8 years in our county. And so we are realizing that as we want to keep doing our work of forming and growing connections in here and building a shared analysis and all the things that we do, we also are really well poised to be conveners and connectors and amplifiers out in the community. So we're realizing in this moment that the most important thing for us is to keep building our connections and our partnerships. As people of faith, most of us are not out there organizing on the front lines, doing the political work, but we are in a position to amplify the work that is being done. So our organizational partnerships are critically important for us. And we are hoping that our working group model would mean that we are more connected and accountable to our partnership organizations through those working groups, because not all of us can address all the issues that we want to in our county. But if we have working groups connected to the organizations working on our various issue areas, we can bring those to the wider cohort when needed to sign a letter or show up for something. So that's kind of our vision moving forward and why we wanted to bring in this partnership panel. We also have partnered for a long time with Faith in Action, but we kind of wanted to give a chance to newer partners organizations that not everybody may have heard of today. So Penny and Marlon are going to orchestrate the panel. I'll just introduce you all first. So we have here Becca Keiler, who is the co-founder of In Our Care, and she'll tell you more about that, but that's basically, we're thinking about that as our juvenile justice partner organization, one of our juvenile justice partner organizations. Jim Lawrence is the board chair of Fixin San Mateo County, which many already know, and is our partner on law enforcement reform in the county. And of course, these issues all overlap. Reverend Deborha Lee is a co-director now of Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity, which is our partner around immigration justice and basically reforming criminal justice system. And then we have Elizabeth Molina, who we've heard from before, who is an organizer with Planned Parenthood Monte, which is our reproductive justice and gender justice, one of our partners on that front. And then we have Jeremy Levine, who's the policy manager as Housing Leadership Council of San Mateo County, one of our partners for housing justice, and Gregory Stevens, who's the Northern California Director of California Interfaith Power and Light, Climate Justice and Environmental Justice Organization. Thank you for being here.
So sorry to put you on the spot and having you sit up there this whole time. I apologize for that, but we were running out of chairs. So, but you look beautiful, so that's a good thing. Again, welcome. My sister friend here, Marlon and I are going to be co-moderating this panel. We are not going to be saying hardly anything except asking you questions which you should have all received ahead of time and been able to think about. And what we're going to do is we're going to give you 3 minutes for each question, and we'll do that. But and we are going to keep time. And the reason we're going to do that is because for us it's about equity, because every voice is as important as every other voice. And so we're going to take turns being the timekeeper. The timekeeper. So the first question that we'd like to ask you is. So how did you get into the work that you're doing? How did you get into that? And I don't mean like your resume, like how did you get the job? I mean that heart space. What led you to do what you're doing? You can talk about it from any angle that you want. So basically your life story in 3 minutes. Okay, go.
This one,
yeah, I guess stand up so people.
this one hits home because of what we just did, where we shared the injustices that my heart's broken.
Yeah.
If it weren't for a grounding in my faith tradition, or grounding in other people's faith traditions, I don't know what I would do. If you don't have a meditation practice, now's time, because it helps you calm down when you have to look, we have to look injustice in the face. And so I work for a climate org, but climate affects everything. If the power is out and you don't have battery backup and you're a trans person who needs testosterone, you can't get it. If you're diabetic like myself, your insulin won't be in the fridge. If you're homeless, you're the first who's going to be impacted. If you're a refugee, half the refugees that are coming up here are because of what we've done in the global south to cause all these problems climatically. So it really touches everything. So I could tell you how I got into this work because climate affects me. But I got into it more so because I've experienced firsthand climate injustice. But the first injustice I felt personally was that I came out queer. And it was the first time it really hit me that you have to experience an injustice to be able to respond to it. Meaning, like, I'm not going to ask all my straight friends what they think it's like to be queer. I'll just ask queer people that. And so, but noticing that distinction is when I noticed that climate change also is impacting all of us, that we have to do something. And then the final thing I'll say is that because the climate crisis is so bad, if we don't do something, our species will be wiped off the face of the planet, and the planet will have to do a whole redo. And so part of me does this work not just because I'm morally called to it or ethically called to it, but otherwise we won't have a future. And so there's a lot of callings to it, but that's my answer.
That was really powerful. Good act to follow. And I'm gonna steal a line because I also think housing connects to everything. The mission of the Housing Leadership Council is to work with communities and their leaders to produce and preserve quality, affordable homes. And I grew up in a community that was very bad at doing that. I'm from Lafayette, which is on the other side of the bay, and I grew up firsthand watching my community fight a housing development. There was an apartment proposal for 315 homes, 20% of which would have been affordable. It would have doubled the stock of affordable housing in my community. And as I was growing up, I would hear meetings, my household would get these flyers of people saying, we don't need affordable housing. We don't need apartments. These people don't belong in our community for a whole laundry list of reasons. This project was first proposed when I was 12 in 2011. 10 years later, it was not approved. It was still going back before the city council. I had gone through middle school and high school and college. I'd been working for a couple of years. Children became adults over the time that this project evolved. And so in 2020, as everyone was protesting social justice at the end of the first Trump administration, I thought, what is something that I can do looking at my community to create a place that is inclusive to everyone who needs a home? And that sort of sent me down a rabbit hole that brought me to San Mateo County, which is like a whole county with a lot of Lafayettes in it.
Yes.
And so that's my story.
Word, preach it, Jeremy.
It's even tougher to follow now that everyone's laughing. But thank you everyone for having us here today. And I think I'm just going to echo intersectionality. For myself, I genuinely believe that healthcare is a human right and everyone deserves access. I myself have experienced that. I started actually off as a patient with Planned Parenthood. Firsthand experience knowing what it feels like to not know where to go to, what is available. As a daughter of immigrants, I also had this instilled fear that, you know, healthcare means ICE. ICE means immigration. And even though I was born here, my parents weren't necessarily, so I thought that put me at risk. And I think of every single other child and Planned Parenthood as itself. I think of all the patients we serve. It's so many people that look like me, and the patients are underserved communities, and it's always everyone's maybe like last resort, but in the best way. I feel like we are there for everybody in vulnerable communities. And I was just so excited to be able to be in a position like myself to start off as a patient and now be able to ensure that people don't have this fear to access healthcare, because it's available and everyone deserves access to it, no matter what, regardless of immigration, status, cost, eliminating all barriers. And I feel like I myself was so driven to be put into this position to be this forefront to now other people, to make sure that they don't have this fear, make sure that we have access to health care. They know that it's not just sexual and reproductive health care, but gender affirming care, primary care, and that everyone deserves access to health care. So I think I'm under 3 minutes, but I want to keep us moving, and I'm very grateful to be in this position.
Good morning, everyone. I think when I was about 19 years old, I was sat in a room in Berkeley in a church basement, and I first heard about the sanctuary movement. And I first met refugees who were fleeing to this country because of bombs that my country and my taxes were going to pay for. And I knew I couldn't walk out of that room without bearing that responsibility for why people were here. And so I just think about that church basement. And so I think church basements, here, congregational basements, you know, are sacred places where moments of transformation can happen. And then when we can expose people to the reality, the continuation of our dollars, the continuation of ourselves out in the world, and the impacts that we have. And so, of course, I wanted to quit school. And my parents were like, what? You know, I wanted to quit school because I was like, no, we have to like go, you know, go to El Salvador and all that stuff. So the other piece I think that gets me into, so what I want to say about that moment was that for me, it saved my faith. Yeah. Because for me, I realized, oh, my faith can make a difference. My faith could actually matter in this world, could matter for climate, could matter for the human life, versus just being about myself and my own piety and my own prayer, but like, oh, my faith has to make a difference in the world for it to be real. And it was in the encounter with people from the global south that I first realized, oh, this is what faith is. Faith means your life is at risk. Faith means, you know, you're getting death threats. Like, maybe that's how we know what we're doing is really making a difference. So, am I at time already? You're good. You're good. I'm good. Okay. Well, I'll pause there. I'll just say one more thing about immigration. You know, I come from a family of immigrants, but I didn't think about immigration as an issue. I thought of this as a racial justice issue for a long time because I had citizenship. Now it doesn't matter what kind of immigrant you are. You know, it's like everyone is at risk. But it was when I was a youth minister, and I realized, oh, immigration is a youth issue. Because this was impacting, and I was working in the Asian Pacific Islander community. I wasn't even working in the Latino community. It was affecting people's family separations. There are all kinds of, you know, adverse childhood, you know, incidents people were having, were all having to do with immigration.
Good morning. Good morning. Again, my name is Jim Lawrence, a little organization called Fixin, San Mateo County. Social justice. It's always been a kind of a core value with me. I grew up in a little town called Knoxville, Tennessee in the 60s. You can imagine what it was like. And I hated Martin Luther King. I was on the other side. Stokely Carmichael. H. Rap Brown. All those guys you read about doing those things. I'm one of those. Do I regret it? Sure I do. But I was one of those. But it was for social justice. I've experienced it personally, professionally, and been able to overcome it. I've been in the Valley 30 years and probably made some of the billionaires around here that we all read about through the work that I do. Well, I got out. My wife convinced me before she passed, you need to give back. You have too many skills that you use otherwhere. So then I said, okay, fine. Let's give back. Let's see, can we make a difference? Let's see, can we change things? All my life, I've been able to change things. I've been blessed. I know that. But a lot of me, when I say me, my color, have not been. But I've been blessed. So I want to give back with these last few years that I have on this good earth. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, I wanted to go first, okay, so I didn't have to follow all this. I came to this work very young, at about 6th grade. That was a couple of years ago. My dad, who was orphaned in 1918 from the flu epidemic of 1918, and then totally on his own at 14, came here from the Midwest and wanted to be in law enforcement. And he was a member of Menlo Park PD most of my growing up. And he was the head of the Juvenile division, which I understand doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. But he inspired me in 6th grade. He gave me a book, and his heart was in working with those kids. He did a lot of work in East Palo Alto, and that's where his heart was. And I have lots of mementos of that work. And that's when I knew I wanted to work with underserved kids. I wanted to be about racial and economic equity. And I got started. I got waylaid. I went off and did social work. That didn't seem like it's waylaid, but the bureaucracy made me crazy. And then I went into business, and then the pandemic hit. And at the early part of the pandemic, I met somebody who I think a lot of you know. I met Paul Bocanegra. And that was the end of everything and the beginning of everything. And I tell Paul, I thank you for bringing me back into this work, and I blame you for bringing me back into this work. And he knows I tell that all the time, okay? But from that, I saw the work that he was doing both with Re-Evolution, which I'm involved with him in also. But I saw the work that he's doing on the JJGPC, the Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention Commission. And I saw that they're mandated to do these reports yearly, and they get totally ignored. And so we sat down in my backyard, and I said, we need to bring the community together. We need to bring the community together. And you guys have been here in our care, San Mateo County. You've been here for Re-Evolution as well. At the same time, in early 2020, I had been told over and over that I was such a UU, and I found UUFRC. And I found the Social Action Committee there, and I found the backing of that. I had walked away from religion long, long ago. That's a whole nother story. But this brought me back because they walk the talk. And that's what you folks all do. You walk the talk. This is an amazing group. I always say we're so much stronger together. And I always advocate for bringing organizations like this together. So I want to thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for the support that you've been of our kids that are in the juvenile system. We work hard to keep them out of the system, and we work hard to stop recidivism. Back this way.
Thank you.
All right. The next question is, what are the 3 most important things your organization is doing right now? The 3 most important. Do you want to go back the other way?
Luckily, this question was easy for me because usually I present what we do at CIPL as 3 things. The first is to change the story. So in 2004, BP came out with a carbon calculator when it revamped its logo to be green. and they put all the blame on climate change on you. One of the largest oil companies in the world put the blame on you and said, you take shorter showers and drink from reusable water bottles, which is good, but it's important for us as religious leaders, as faith leaders who have that chunk of time where we're spending time holy together and we've got a little liturgy or something, to shift the narrative, to help people recognize that the world is falling apart, and it's not because they took a 20-minute shower. It's because of the system, the extractive system we live in. And it's going to take a lot of work to change the system. All of these little things do matter, but the bigger picture is that it's the system, and the power players up top are the ones causing the problems. The second is about church basements and facilities. We're flipping, or we're greening our facilities. This is something we've been up to for a while. If you look out there, you can actually see a solar panel they've installed, which has reduced their carbon footprint so far by 5,686 tons. So things like that. We have control over our buildings. There's resources and rebates and things like that that our org can help you find and discover. And then we'll celebrate you for doing all this great work. But it's in the church basements that a lot of this work happens. The Black Panthers, where the free breakfast program started, is just a couple blocks from my office at the UU Church in Oakland. And we're going to try to get EV charging stations and solar panels on their buildings. But it all kind of happened in a church basement. And the last one is policy. Right now we're in that limbo phase where policy is being written, where we've become close friends with Josh Becker, who's, I'm pretty sure, down here. And we've been trying to become, as we grow as an organization, get closer and closer to the actual people writing legislation so that we could influence them. Because lots of times they'll say, fill the oil well, but they will forget to say, because it's close to a church. They've got hospitals, they've got libraries, they've got schools, but we're going to be there and say, what about faith institutions? What about synagogues? What about churches? What about temples? Let's make sure those are included. And that's a little thing, but come keep your eyes and ears open to our email updates to learn about Make Polluters Pay. So all of these big fires down in LA, the big thing that we're all working on right now in environmental circles is trying to get the big polluters to pay rather than another bond that would just make us taxpayers pay for it. And then finally, there was one more thing. And I forgot it, but that's enough. Oh.
Well, I don't know if you all know this, but there are a lot of cities in San Mateo County, and they all control their own housing policies. Each one is a little different, and so it's hard to choose just three, but I'm going to tell you about two campaigns, then I'm going to tell you about a big picture campaign. Because the way to change housing policy is to work with communities to actually support very specific projects. So in San Mateo, in congregation with Reverend Alvaro and the Congregational Church of San Mateo County, we've been working to pass protections for tenants that can set a model for the county and help people stay in their homes. There's a big spectrum of what tenant protections can mean, and we're going to be doing a training to help faith leaders and others learn that maybe some of you will be at in starting next month. But that is one example of a campaign in a city that we are working with One San Mateo and this church and other community leaders to try and help tenants stay housed. In Menlo Park, the city is working to convert a set of parking lots in its downtown to affordable housing. And the business owners and the property owners downtown and some of the multi-million-dollar homeowners in the suburbs are upset about an effort to convert housing for cars into housing for people. And so we are working with a lot of people, including other multi-million-dollar homeowners, who want to see housing in their community and want to see public resources utilized for housing. Both of these campaigns come straight out of those cities' housing elements. And I want everyone to raise their hands here. Who here knows what a housing element is? Who here has read a housing element? Oh, wow, okay, some people have read it. Okay, that's amazing. Oh, I thought everyone would put their hand down. So I'm going to try and explain 500-page documents in 1 minute, but these are the plans that every community has for housing. They have to update them every 8 years and demonstrate that they have capacity for new housing and actually commit to changing their policies. And these housing elements are playing out in every community. It's not just San Mateo or Menlo Park. In Half Moon Bay, there's an affordable housing development for farm workers. In Pescadero, the county is working on trying to meet farm worker housing needs. In Burlingame and Redwood City and San Mateo, there is city-owned land for housing. In a lot of other cities, there are the same commitments to improve tenant protections and help people stay housed, to change the zoning rules, to streamline things, to decrease fees. I could keep listing because there are hundreds of these policies, but the housing element is just a commitment to change them. It is not the change itself. And so we're working with communities to make those changes.
Hello. So 3 things that Planned Parenthood Monte is currently working on. Our number 1 priority right now is patient safety, confidentiality, and privacy, yes, and protections for not just patients, but also staff members, right? So, and we're also not just thinking about local patients. We tend to overlook or not remember that there's patients out of state seeking probably gender-affirming care here in our counties or cities because in their state they don't have access. So now I'm ensuring that that we're protecting our patients, our staff, their privacy. Gender-affirming care is our second one, and I also want to include just LGBTQ youth. We also do so much intersectional work. We're not just providing these services, but also protecting it at a city and local level, ensuring that our cities know that we're standing with our immigrant community, with our LGBTQ, with our trans community, and ensuring that our whole affiliate is aware that we do provide gender-affirming care at all of our health centers through a model that allows autonomy over an individual to start their own journey by eliminating the barriers of having to be diagnosed with gender dysphoria, go through a series of appointments. So we're really eliminating barriers and expanding access to gender-affirming care. And then number 3, always unusual, is expanding literally brick and mortar. So we just opened our Oakland Health Center, which is currently the biggest Planned Parenthood health center in the country, which is so exciting to say. We also just swallowed up Nevada, so Planned Parenthood Monte is now California and all of Nevada. Wow. So expanding access in Nevada. We did a lot of work in expanding abortion access to ensuring that more providers can provide abortion procedures in Nevada. So there's a lot going on, but I would say gender-affirming care is at the top of our list right now in LGBTQ communities because we see these attacks every single day. It's not just sexual and reproductive health care, and we know that they're just going to continue these attacks on our vulnerable communities. So that is what we're doing, and I also just want to shed light that we do a lot of intersectional work on housing. We ensure that we're there to give public comment so they know that Planned Parenthood stands. We know that if your housing is not in this right situation, do you think you're going to attend your healthcare appointment? If it's raining or if there's a serious catastrophe, is your priority going to get to your health appointment? Or same, if your status is at risk or if your ICE has been seen near a health center, is an undocumented patient going to want to attend our health center? So that is what we're ensuring that folks know, that we're so much diverse and intersectional, and that we're standing with all communities and issues, not just healthcare.
The issue the Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity is trying to address is really the issue of racism and institutional racism and the criminalization of people of color. And our state in California has been at the forefront of the criminalization of immigrants, and on one hand, and then black people and people of color through 2 major systems. One is our immigration system, and one is the incarceration system. California started mass incarceration, and California will be the place of mass deportation because we have the most number of immigrants in the. Do we still have a country? In the country. Yeah. So this has been the issue we've been focusing on. Our main strategies are 3: transforming leaders, faith leaders, and also impacted leaders to be able to lead and design, and define the campaigns that we're working on. The second strategy is transforming the narrative. We also have a huge narrative issue around, immigrants as blessing, immigrants as contributors, immigration as beautiful, and not seen, as stigma. And then the third is transforming policy and practice. about how we address that. So we have just one campaign this year, and our one campaign is sanctuary. Sanctuary congregations and sanctuary people, and what does that look like for communities to stand with, especially right now, with this community, the immigrant community, which is like the brunt of attack of the abuse and like the degradation of all of our civil and human rights. A level of cruelty that I've never seen, the marshaling of military forces and Homeland Security, the Homeland Security budget to do this work. And so this is our moment to really have to speak up and defend those human rights.
Thank you. Fixin is doing three things. One, as you all know, there's no independent body in San Mateo County that looks into the sheriff's office. We have no idea what's going on in there. We have no right, no legal right. They have laws that prevent that. However, the legislature did give the county, all counties, AB 1185, the authorization to implement oversight board. So we're just trying to raise the awareness so everyone knows about that. Secondly, we want to highlight the benefits of oversight. She spoke about the inequities against certain people in our community. We can flush that out. You all know about the turmoil that's going on in there. So even on the other side, the deputies are now beginning to understand that oversight doesn't point blame. It builds transparency, it builds trust. It brings us all together. So we have to make sure people understand that. And last but not least, we have to make it a kitchen table issue.
What? Can you say that
A
again?
kitchen table issue. If it doesn't impact you, you don't vote for it or against it. So we have to make it a kitchen table issue. How is it that in San Mateo County? We're spending $20 million in the last 2 years just because of bad practices, inadequate training, no one looking over the shoulder saying there's a better way to police in San Mateo County. There's a potential of another 50 million in lawsuits coming against the county because of the turmoil. Had we had oversight, even though they won't say it publicly, they have admitted privately, we wouldn't have this. We may have some, but not to this extent. So the county's in a real corner because one individual has filed a lawsuit for $8 million. There's probably more, like 10 more like him, who could do it. And the way the law is written, they would win. That's the real crux of it. And whose dollars pays for that? Yours and mine. We talk about housing. Think of what $50 million would do. You know, just we're wasting money. But I'm hopeful. Everybody's raised their head. They're saying the right things privately. We're working to get them to say it publicly. After the election's over, we're going to have a strong campaign to really bring it to the forefront. So thank you.
Wow, I'm just listening to everybody here, and the intersectionality between all of us is amazing. Likewise, in our care, San Mateo County is very much about racial and economic equity. And I'm going to steal your term, Jim. We need to make this a kitchen table topic, knowledge. Our biggest push at in our care, San Mateo County this year, is to educate people. Because if your kids aren't in the juvenile system, you don't care. They're bad kids, right? Must be their fault, right? I keep saying all we have to do is eliminate racism and poverty and everything will be fine. But that's but that's not actually our first goal. I mean, it is, up here, but what we're working on this year is really to educate the Board of Supervisors, all of our officials, county and city officials, and the community as to why it matters that we take care of kids that are at risk and that are in the system. Because recidivism is rampant, it's going up. It's not working what they're doing in our juvenile hall. These kids are not getting rehabilitated. They're not getting programs. The recidivism is getting larger. That means We are paying more in taxes to take care of these kids. For those of us who don't care about it from this perspective, care about it from that perspective, that was our pocketbook. That's what it's affecting. It's affecting our pocketbooks, and as well, everybody in all of the elections is talking about safety. This is about safety. We have some success stories of some of these kids who have done some horrible things, who are now doing incredible things because they're getting help. But they're not, our juvenile hall is not up to compliance with the law. We're trying to get it there, so we need to educate people as to why this is important. Then we need all of you to be behind us, to get in front of the officials and to make them, the last time the annual inspection reports were done by JJDPC and turned in to the Board of Supervisors, there was no response. They don't even respond. That's not going to happen this year, I promise you. And we're going to ask you to support us. But that's later. That's the next question. But we're raising awareness. We have submitted PDAs to the county. We're getting some information back. We're going to combine that with what JJDPC, Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention Commission, with their reports, and then we're going to be in front of all the powers that be saying, look, you guys, stop ignoring this. These kids are our kids. This is our system. Let's fix it.
Wow, right? Yeah. Everyone? Incredible. And thank you for sticking so well to the time, because we're getting a fire hose from everybody. We love it. All right, last question, as you know, is what specifically can faith leaders and faith communities do to support your work and to support those most directly impacted? And as specific as you can be is really helpful. We don't need to go in order. Who wants to go first? All right, then we'll go this way. All right, great. Fix that.
Okay, I'm going to read, and I'm going to say right off the bat, these aren't as specific as you just asked for, Penny, so I'm sorry. And the reason for that is until we get all the information and the reports back, we can't be as specific as we would like. But if we can all work together, I promise to get you that information. So this is what we're looking at. Once the inspection reports are sent back, are finished and go to the board, what we're going to be asking your community and everyone that we're reaching out to is to show up with us in front of the board to say, okay, we need you to take action. This is required by law. Quit ignoring it. So, number one, we're going to ask you to show up to support that. Number two, there's a possibility that we're also going to be meeting with Board of Supervisors and other community and city, or county and city officials independently, one at a time. And we very much like to have a faith leader. We've talked about that privilege that caller brings. Thank you. It's really, really, and you guys have been great showing up in court with us, and I think it's made a big difference. Also, supporting in our care when and if the DA, again, he's been called on this, and I'm hoping it's going to stop, he's trying these kids in court. He's trying other people in court too, but he tries in the press. He's trying them in press. He's released names of juveniles. He's released birth dates of juveniles, and some of these kids and their families are being threatened. So he has been called on it. I'm hoping it's stopped. If it hasn't, going to ask again to have support on that. As well, probation claims that, and there's some validity to this claim, that because we've reduced the number of kids in detention, it's very hard to get contracts because there's so few kids. So nobody wants such a small contract for so little money. We think we can get people from the community to come in and provide. Some will want payment for it, but I think we can get small contracts, and I think probably a lot of us in this room know people that will help provide programs for these kids. Probation has totally blocked us. I think we can do this, and I think we have a way in, so we will be reaching out to ask if people can help with that. Work with us. We're also, these kids very often when they finish their time of incarceration, they're literally put on the street. Sometimes some of us have tried to pick them up and they let them out another door and we never see them again. So then these kids just go back out in the community. Very often they come from homes that they can't go home to. So we're looking for some kind of step-down type program, and that's something else we're going to be working on. Lastly, I don't know if your congregations are aware of this, your fellowships are aware of this, but there are almost no foster care families in San Mateo County. Almost all of our children are sent out of county, which takes them away from everything and everyone they know. That's not the best. So if your families might be interested in that, that's something else that we'd like to have and ask. Thank you.
Two simple requests. One, you have a platform. You're a very respected group. We need you to add the need for oversight in your message. Not necessarily asking you to endorse us, but talk about the benefits of it. Share it with your neighbors. It's important. If all of us, they see you as leaders, I see you as leaders. That's all we ask. And then people can make their own judgment decision if they support it or not. But they need to be educated. My neighbors in Foster City tell me, Jim, we have our own police, it doesn't bother me. I said, yeah, your kid's in the county jail over there. And guess what? 6 people died in the last year in that jail. And nothing was done. We can't even get reports. What happened?
Right.
All of a sudden, his attitude changes. He thinks about it. He understands it. I'm hopeful he will vote. But you have a platform. All I ask you is just use it. Thank you.
I'd like to invite, you don't have to become a sanctuary congregation. I loved it when I drove by and I saw a sanctuary congregation here on the front. But I think that as congregations, I want to ask you not to put your head in the sand about what's happening. And you don't have to call yourself sanctuary, but it's an invitation to do something and to do the work. And one of those things is to accompany. We are looking for congregations who can form accompaniment teams, and we have accompaniment training to accompany someone at risk, a family that's at risk right now, for 6 months, the first 6 months of their transition here. The other thing is to look at your spaces in your congregations. This is like a pretty extreme time in our country's history, and we think about where would we have been in World War II or something, and what would we have been willing to risk and to do? And so we are asking congregations to look at your spaces and see, could you house someone temporarily? We're looking for temporary respite housing for someone, because the only safety people may be to have to relocate month to month from different places for safety. So we are looking for that, and it wouldn't be public sanctuary, so it wouldn't be the media and all that. It would be a very different kind of sanctuary of respite housing. So providing a safe space. Sanctuary means safety and belonging for all people, so we want your voices out there. When incidents happen, we need to be monitoring when people are released from juvenile or from probation and they are not citizens, what is happening to them. We have to make sure they're not getting transferred over to ICE. We have to make sure parole and probation are not collaborating with ICE and giving people's release information. We need your voices on closing these cages where people are dying from, they're not getting better, they're not healing in a cage, and we need your voices to get that money redirected to these services that really prevent, support life, and support people. So safe spaces, getting approximate and accompanying immigrant families. Sometimes we get requests down here in the peninsula, and it'd be really great to be able to know we have one community that is from Palo Alto that is already accompanying someone right now. So I think those are my asks. Yeah.
I have a couple as well. First is kind of what a few folks said that they're already doing, but we're kind of asking you for support to help shift the narrative. It's right, this stereotype that you can't be queer and a member of faith, or that you can't support abortion and turn to your faith community for support. So really having those conversations. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Reverend Tovis, but she wrote a wonderful letter to the editor, writing letters to the editors, an op-ed, just standing with your community, showing that as a leader, as mentioned in your community, that your voice really does matter. It has an impact on folks who may have thoughts or have shied away from religion in the past, like I myself too, raised Catholic, thinking I'm a sinner, right, with this mentality. But it really shifted growing up and now being in spaces like these and realizing, no, I can be a member of faith, I can have these beliefs, and I can also ensure that other folks feel safe enough to turn to these communities, because you really are these strong pillars and have such a great connection to your community. And a lot of folks turn to you. The second one was provide resources and stand in solidarity. So something as simple as raising a trans flag up during the month of during the Day of Trans Day of Visibility, it really stands a lot with the trans community. Pride flags, right? We also do provide direct resources. So I do have a QR code over there that says Scan Me, where our education department can also connect you with resources like pamphlets, safe sex items, kits like that. So if you are interested, I definitely encourage you. It's just a short little survey that just basically, and you choose which kit makes most sense to you, and then they'll ship it out to you, and you can have that directly there for your congregation, and it's free. You can order it monthly as well, but that's what we have for y'all. And also just support Planned Parenthood programming. This is also a direct invitation. I see a few familiar faces, but we do have a program similar to Interfaith, where we bring faith leaders all around now, California and Nevada, to bring into a space where we provide resources, training. This next upcoming one is March 12th, 11:30 to 1 p.m. And it is in collaboration with the ACLU NorCal, where we are gonna go a bit more in depth over our gender affirming care program, and also as well as kind of like a little know your rights, what current attacks are going on, what's still available here in California, or just what also national political attacks, but any executive order has not impacted care here in California or Nevada. I do want to mention that. And those are three things. I do have a QR code for that link as well over there, but I'm here as well for any questions. But those are three overviews, and I'm happy to answer anything in the next portion.
I mean, I think one component of something that everyone's saying that I'm going to echo is that everything we do depends on community support. The housing leadership, I'm going to call back to our mission again. We work with communities to produce and preserve quality, affordable homes. And so we can only change the rules that make building housing possible, provide the incentives to build affordable housing, get elected officials to actually vote for housing if we have community support. And so for the specific campaigns that we are running in Menlo Park, in San Mateo, that's not us alone. We're working with local organizations to try and build community awareness, to host events, and we need all the help that we can get from leaders like everyone in this room to make sure that people know the opportunities to sign a petition, to write a letter, to attend a meeting, to talk to an elected official, to leverage your voice. Because no matter what's going on at the national level, we are still a democracy here. And as a democracy here, we have agency to make an impact. A wonky thing is that in the housing elements, there are all those commitments that every city has, and we need help tracking them, because believe it or not, I can't attend every city council meeting all the time. And so having some way to get out, like we have a spreadsheet tracking all the information just so you can know what is in these documents and relevant. Being able to share that with as many people as possible and identify people who want to take a step deeper and do more than just engage with the electeds, but actually learn about and engage with the policy itself can make a really big impact. So we have resources that we share regularly, and just staying in touch by email and our other communications channels can be really valuable for making sure that you are able to inform your communities about what's happening.
Joining groups like this is obviously really helpful. And another organization down here in the South Bay is the Peninsula Interfaith Climate Action Group, which someone or some of you could join that group and report back here and give insight into. That's actually one of our Interfaith Climate Action groups. Is how, the way in which we try to organize is by region, because again, it can't be at every city council meeting. And so that is for this region. And so that'll be more local politics. If you go to interfaithpower.org and you sign up for our newsletter, you'll get more statewide political things that you can engage on. And Debbie Mytels from UU Redwood City is the leader there, and she's really awesome. Long history of doing this good work. Another thing you could do is change your utility. So y'all live in Peninsula Clean Energy Territory, which produces all of its energy from clean energy sources, pumps it through PG&E's lines because they own the lines, and then it goes into your home. The rates are cheaper, the rebates are better, the incentives are better, it's all clean and green, and you can tell your congregants to do that, but you can also do that in your congregation. Peninsula Clean Energy. You probably at home already have it because you were bumped over to it automatically because of the good work of climate activists in the community. And then the other one is to form a green team. Each congregation is going to be different. Each location is going to be slightly different. Each environmental impact is going to be a little bit different. If you want to do facility stuff because you have a big facility, what if you have a small facility that was built in the 30s and therefore the power system's just not going to be able to handle EV charging or something? Then maybe look to do something else. Maybe go into policy work. If you have certain people in the congregation that are interested in gardening or something, gardening takes a lot of work, and lots of people, when they hear climate justice, are like, let's do a garden. And then they forget that you have to keep gardening. And it kind of goes to, but that's a good way you can, you could bring in the Boy Scouts or something to come help you revive your garden or something like that. But forming that green team also gives a little history to your organization, because people in church will sometimes disappear, but that was the climate icon who disappeared or moved away or something. But if you have that team, there's someone to say, hey, back in the day, Debbie and I did this, and it was really cool. We can either repeat the same mistake or repeat the same success, you know. But forming that green team is helpful, and it takes some of the burden off you as the leader of the congregation and puts it back into the hands of the congregation itself.
All right. So we don't need jobs, we just do the things that they've said, and we'll be busy. So we will try to capture a lot of this and put it out, for people who missed, and also to, be able to respond. And a reminder that we cannot do everything, but together we can do many things and really make a difference. And we're going to have questions. I want to thank you for using your platform to speak to us and encouraging us to use our platform to speak for those issues that you care so deeply about and we care so deeply about. And I feel preached to this morning in the best sense of that word, in terms of us having a platform. And when Richard Rothstein was here years and years ago, he said, you got to change public opinion if you want. Sure. And we're like, oh, well, but how do we do that? And he's like, that is your job. And he pointed to us as faith leaders. And I have never forgotten that moment. And I feel like we had another moment like that today. And you all echoed that so beautifully. And I appreciate that. So we have time. Again, I don't think I've ever moderated a panel where everybody stuck to their time. Can we give them a hand for that? And we were able to hear the kernel of everything from each one of you. So questions and, yep, all right.
I just have a quick question for Rev Deb, I guess you're calling. I missed what you said about California's history in, did you say that we started the detention centers here in California, or just, could you just repeat that one part? Yeah. I'd like to know that question.
Yes, the question was about what I was referring to about California's history with incarceration.
Yes.
Well, the first immigration detention center was probably Angel Island. Right. So that was here in California, and the Chinese Exclusion Act, which was, California was ground zero for that. I would say California was also ground zero for mass incarceration policies in the 80s, and the model of the mass prisons and the growth of the prison industry, which has now been exported around the world. So, I also just not, so we're not just all like doom and gloom, that in the last 10 years, we had some very positive criminal justice legal reform that we also led in to try to undo, as part of this movement of reparations, to undo the harms of mass incarceration. Now that kind of came screeching to a halt this fall because the opposition was on a huge thing all about smash and grab and those kind of things, creating a climate of fear, just as they're creating a climate of fear on immigrants, creating this climate of fear around, not to say that those things are not happening, but they're not looking at the root causes, and they're not really addressing them in a deep way. So that's why we felt as a responsibility as California, and the whole sanctuary thing, they're attacking California, Chicago, other places because of sanctuary, which also began, not just here, but Arizona, and so we're an important place. We're the beginning of demographic change in this country, and everything that's happening is about demographic change in this country. That's right. So they're coming for it, right? Yeah. So we have to stand and reverse the harms that have been done.
Thank you.
Katie?
I actually also have a question for Deborha. You mentioned accompaniment and sanctuary, or the short-term sanctuary. Can you say more about what that looks like? If a congregation commits to accompany somebody, what have they committed to? How do churches that don't have showers and washers and dryers and that kind of thing help offer sanctuary? You can't live at church safely.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to clarify the term sanctuary. When we hear sanctuary, often people think of someone living in a congregation. Sanctuary actually is a commitment to a community that is at risk. So you could also do sanctuary for trans people right now, too. We could be trans, homeless, sanctuary. There's 1,000 ways to do sanctuary. So first of all, I just want to clarify that because people have in mind the housing only. Our accompaniment teams are volunteers who are trained to walk with, not to fix, not to save, not to do everything for, but to help. When most immigrants come, we go to my uncle. My Uncle Alan, he was everybody went to him. He was the first one to come to San Francisco. He taught people how to drive. He helped people connect to jobs. So our job for our accompaniment teams is to be like extended family, connect people to resources, and to provide community in a very lonely and stressful time. So that is for the first 6 months of someone that we screen and all that, and we match them with a trained accompaniment team. Now the respite housing. We do have a need for housing. There's about 4 congregations right now that we lean on all the time. One congregation, they're we can house someone for 3 weeks. Someone's we could house people for 6 months. And we're, presenting someone who it just gives us more time to find something and them more time to find something more stable. If you can imagine trying to figure out in this housing market, right? So that's what that is. Not everyone has a shower. It doesn't have to be state of the art. We've had 2 congregations have converted offices to it. There's a lot of things we can work out.
Lori.
I was just wondering if people could share aspirational positive models, whether it's a city or a county in California, if there's a bright spot somewhere in the country, where are there little anecdotes that we are striving towards so that we could see, where we're going?
Great.
I have things I'm excited about because while so many of the issues here and so many people are suffering because of national things, housing is still a state and local issue, first and foremost. And so states and local governments are making very meaningful progress. California is struggling. I'm going to be honest. A lot of the jurisdictions in San Mateo County and in the Bay Area are making it very, very hard to build anything. But the community of Cambridge, just as an example, which in some ways looks a little bit like San Mateo County in that it's very wealthy, it's a lot of suburban areas, even though it has massive universities and industries bringing in a ton of wealth and economic opportunity there. Cambridge just passed a policy that made it possible to build up to 6-story apartment buildings everywhere in the city. And this is so meaningful because you might not realize 90% of the residential land in San Mateo County bans apartments. And that is just one of the layers of policies that make it very, very difficult to build homes for people who need them. But it is a very important step to say we are going to allow all kinds of housing in all of our neighborhoods where it's safe and feasible. And so that is a model that is not just a Cambridge thing. Spokane, Washington recently allowed 4-story buildings throughout the city, and they're about to eliminate any limits on what you can build in their downtown. The city of Austin just eliminated parking requirements, which says that we're going to value housing for people over housing for cars. And you can still have places for cars to park. It's just not going to be prioritized over the places that people live. And so all over the country, these changes are happening. And in California, they are happening too. It's just a different pace in different parts of the state. And so what's beautiful is that our communities do still have a lot of control over what happens there, and nothing the federal administration does can change that. So that's a lot of power that we hold as community organizers. And things I'm really excited about us being able to follow in the footsteps of.
I just want to shout out one policy, and I think that this finally passed in San Mateo, where the sheriff is now 100% no collaboration with ICE. Is that correct? That's what I understand, right?
You cannot use county funds to support any ICE activity. Right.
Did you say there might be some? So that was a long time in coming, because for a long time Santa Clara had a policy, San Francisco had a policy, but if you were driving between, you could be in trouble, right? If you're going through San Mateo. What we're looking for right now is for that same policy to be at the state level. There is the state sanctuary law, but there are some major loopholes in that law that was part of the compromise to get that law passed. And so people who are still getting turned over to ICE every day are people who have had a former conviction, who have served their time, earned their release from society, and instead of coming home are then getting turned over to ICE. And that could we're worried that could happen in other places. And parole already collaborate. Someone got called out from a halfway house. The parole officer said, "Can you come out and sign something?" And they set them up with ICE. So CDCR, the state prisons and parole, which is under the governor, and the governor reiterated last week, he still believes in that, of turning people over who have past convictions, who have served their time. And I think a couple months ago, we had 2 gentlemen here who were in that situation. And, they're living in total fear right now. So, because we also know that, they can come get them at their homes as well. So that's one policy we really want to have. Really none of our resources being used to do the work of the federal government, because our people, we're not trained to do immigration law. Local police do not know, they don't understand immigration law. It's very complicated, so.
And I just want to say, I think it's 1% or less of 1% of the immigrant population is involved in the criminal system. That's not true of the rest of the population. So.
Yeah, I think we have to be careful. I mean, it is true. Immigrant communities commit crimes at a lower rate than other people, because everyone's scared to death to get in trouble, to do anything. But I also think it's really important that we not criminalize other people, or not extend that. About 10%, 9%, I think, of the population in our state prisons are non-citizens. And so 9% of our state prisoners are at risk of getting deported, and
yeah, and I'll just in the juvenile hall here in San Mateo County, 98.9% of the kids are kids of color. Yeah. I don't have specific you're asking for successes. I don't have specific places that I'm going to point to right now, although I could get those and send them. But there are a number of facilities throughout the country that are trying what's called restorative justice practices. They're true rehabilitation. And those facilities are finding considerably lower rates of recidivism. We as a country tend to have this punishment model. And I have people say to me all the time, well, what should we do to them? You know, like, what? Shouldn't they, shouldn't they have a harder sentence? Because that does what? What does that do? What satisfaction does that give us? Because it doesn't stop recidivism. If we want to stop recidivism, we need to restore people. And there are some organizations throughout the country that are doing that. There's a lot of organizations in other countries that are doing that also much better than we are. We tend to have this punishment model that I guess comes from our Puritan heritage, I guess.
That's something to preach on.
Yeah.
And also distinguishing accountability. We do want accountability. Absolutely. You know, I mean, our current president has, I don't know how many felonies, has not been accountable 1 day, 1 minute for it. You know, I'm not gonna, I would still provide him sanctuary, but I would want him some accountability, you know? So I think we need to reframe this for our congregants. Accountability, not punishment.
These are kind of, I cover Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, and Santa Cruz County, so I'm a little all over the place. I get a very diverse perspective. I'm not sure which counties here in San Mateo, but sometimes things that are symbolic can also mean a lot for communities. So resolution saying you stand with the immigrant community, ensuring that you are a sanctuary city, holding your city council members accountable. If they say they're going to invest in the rapid response network for immigration, they say, we want to invest in it. Okay, next time, how much are you going to invest into it? So things like that mean a lot. When it's Pride Month, making sure that there is a Pride resolution, that the city is honoring Pride Month. So holding accountability and sometimes memorandums like that can also be very symbolic for a community. I see it happening in San Jose a lot, right? Santa Clara County right now is suing the federal administration, I think, over birthright citizenship. So there's some peaks of hope in some areas, and I think it's still, you know, we see the action coming alive.
Yeah. Jeremy, there's lots of building going on along El Camino.
Well, and I was about to say,
Can you talk more about that, especially what portion of that is really going to people who really need it?
yeah. Yeah, well, okay, so that's a really good question, because I actually was thinking, I was a little unfair to San Mateo County. Last November, the city of San Mateo passed Measure 2, which is the first time in more than 30 years that the city of San Mateo has increased the kinds of buildings that it allows. So that's a historic change, and it's the reversal of the tide of history. Those parking lots in Menlo Park that we're advocating for, those are only an opportunity for affordable housing because a prior city council said, we want a plan for affordable housing here. And all over the county, cities are providing land and changing rules to make that kind of housing possible. So the changes here are more incremental than some of the things I talked about, but they're real and they're meaningful and they reflect a lot of local advocacy. San Mateo County, along the El Camino corridor, has put almost all of its plans for new housing in one strip. And that is both meaningful in that there's new housing getting built somewhere, but it's also a continuation of past patterns where people who are renters, people who have lower incomes, are only allowed to live in one area because that's the only place that the housing that they live in is allowed. And so when we say a lot of building along El Camino Real, in historic terms, it looks like a lot of building because everyone goes on El Camino Real. That's the main corridor. But it's the only place where the building's really happening. And so if you look at like a timeline of when most housing was built in San Mateo County, the median age of the housing here is pre-1970. So a lot of housing was built in 1970, and we've had less and less every decade since then. On the question of like how much of the housing is affordable, most cities have rules that say 10 to 20% of all new housing has to be affordable. to people making a lower income. The word affordable is tied to the median income in the area. So even some of that affordable housing is for people who might be making $100,000. That is a reflection, more. That is a reflection of how high incomes in the area are, and the fact that so many decades of economic exclusion have meant that only wealthy people can live here. The reality is, if you do not build housing for wealthy people, they don't disappear. They bid up right? Like they still exist. So what they do is they bid up the price of housing that exists. So we are in a game of musical chairs in housing. And at the end of the day, some chairs are going to be taller than others. Literally. But saying we're not going to build any tall chairs just means that people who are tall sit in the shorter chairs. And some people don't get any chairs at all. So it's important to build all of the types of housing, and it's really important to invest our public resources in housing that meets the needs of people who cannot afford other options.
A question, Gregory, what legislation around climate change, environmentalism will be coming up in California that you're hoping for? I'm thinking extraction tax was one that...
Well, one is the make polluters pay. The other one that I wrote down that I forgot to mention, which I just forgot again, is a slush fund. So with all the climate disaster down in LA, with the wildfires up here, both caused by utility companies, which I'll say more on, providing some sort of fund so that funds could be directly distributed. Basically trying to cut out a lot of the middle people that cause funds to slow down. Those are the ones I know of right now. The other one, Wahab actually just wrote, Senator Wahab, with Reclaim Our Power, a coalition that I work with, to turn PG&E, it's a study about it, but to turn PG&E, the largest utility monopoly in the country with the highest utility rates that raised all of their rates 6 times this past year and still made $10 billion plus in profit, into a nonprofit, so that all 10 billions of those dollars that they made in profit would go back into the system, so that the campfire that started because of the utility pole, that 100-year-old utility pole, which is like right around the time electricity was just being popularized, would be taken care of.
And the Dixie Fire.
And the Dixie Fire. 89 people. They were charged with 89 murders. Then they went bankrupt. Then they got bailed out. I mean, this company is off the rails. Gavin Newsom signed a bill in 2020, SB 350, that kind of opened the gateway to this. And the nonprofit is called Golden State Energy. And there's all these different models: nonprofit, not-for-profit, didn't know there was a difference, cooperative, publicly owned. Do the ratepayers own it, or just is it somehow collectively owned a different way? Thankfully, we've got some Stanford interns, and I said, research this for me, please. But we're looking at the ways in which other companies, utility companies, Palo Alto owns its own utility lines, for example. So what happened in the 20s when that was going on? You know, obviously all these years later, it's a different town and different politics. But what did they do then that's interesting? And what did Sacramento do to get SMUD? And, you know, how are all these other places trying to transition so that we could transition the largest utility monopoly into a nonprofit? So we just had Berkeley City Council, for an example of a city thing that worked. They just all unanimously voted to study this and to really put some energy and time and research into this. Richmond has already done that, the city of Richmond. San Francisco is already working on this. With San Francisco is trying to buy out the utility lines from PG&E and has their own kind of mini campaign.
And Alameda, right?
And Alameda has done this as well. And so we're piggybacking on all of this. So at my church, actually, we have a talk with the SFPUC and the Reclaim Our Power Coalition, and we're going to kind of debate and also share what we're doing and encourage each other. But so it's all sorts of things like that are happening. And the policy, again, it's not written all yet, and so we can't really say what. Look, the previous years, it was plastic bag bans. It was, I mean, sometimes the work that we're doing is so obvious, but the fight is really hard to get the plastic bag ban. And that was the second time we did the plastic bag ban because there's so many loopholes in the first one. And so one thing that you can do, though, in following the work we do is that we try to highlight the bills this could be good or bad in your mind, highlight the bills that a lot of the climate groups in California are working on. Instead of picking one that is just us that we wrote with a senator or something like that, we're not there yet necessarily as an org, but we do work in coalition with so many orgs that we then pick out the two or usually four pieces of policy that we think can pass, with one or two maybe that are going to be a little harder. But we try to, and then we have a lobby day in June. Now I'm rambling. Policy's coming.
Jeremy, you've been trying to ask a question for 20 minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I seem to sense a sort of a mindset shift in terms of climate change from, more towards we're going to have to deal with how to live with this rather than try and reverse it. And it just seems like a lot of the legislations and things that are more focused towards dealing with the latest disaster, and that takes up all the resources, and then there's nothing left for actually dealing with the root cause. And I don't know, I hope I'm wrong about that.
Well, so this is a response, but it's not the one you probably wanted. Congregations have facilities, and instead of just getting solar and battery backup, you can refer to yourself as a sanctuary or a resilience hub. So when the power goes out, you have battery backup. So this room right here, a small room, it wouldn't take too much energy, is connected to a kitchen so that there could be refrigeration of medical devices. You could plug in your medical devices. You could plug in your phone to call your aunt and tell her that you're stuck in a church, right? But it's looking at the disasters to come. Migration right now is a big disaster or like the causes behind it. And so the solution is being sanctuary. Part of a resilience hub, I think, is being a sanctuary congregation, right? And so there's all these sorts of things. The policies aren't coming down like we want them. They're not coming fast enough. The communities aren't doing it. But we have some things that we can do in our hands, and that is respond to these crises that are going to come, that are happening. My best friend lives in New Orleans, and she has developed a resilience hub network there, and they get hit with hurricanes way harder, than our disasters. But it's been powerful to hear the ways in which, through those disasters, they call them lighthouses because it's New Orleans, so it's right on the water, but it's also the only place that has light in the middle of a power outage. But it's places that people come and find respite. And there's a lot you learn in doing that, because when you have a bunch of random people in your room, if you don't have a youth minister in there, they're going to be very bored. But we can start to think of ways that we can turn our facilities into these places of not just meeting, but really like revolutionary spaces that are caring for the community, revolutionary care for the community. Yes, Marv?
It's not a question. I just want to encourage people here to be in touch with Senator Becca. Just thanking him for everything that he's doing. It's an amazing amount of stuff that he's doing for the climate.
We had a relaunch where we relaunched a nonprofit, and we have our own 501c3 and all this, and Becca came and spoke. And if you've ever been to a meeting where the senator comes and speaks, it's like, hello, what's the org's name again? And we support you, and see you later. And he came for 3 hours. He did the VIP thing, he did the regular thing, he did the Q&A thing, but it was a really neat moment of like, wow, this person really does seem like they want to tap into what's happening on the ground in climate, and so we should push back. The other funny thing is he pointed at people and knew them by name and said, you push back. Like Debbie Mitel's, he said, I know you push back, you call my office all the time. So he is listening as well in many ways.
All right, guys, we could do this until 2 o'clock, but we're not going to. I hope our guests will be able to stay for lunch and you can continue the conversation. Before we started this morning, a few of us were here and we were having a conversation about absolutely how dismal everything is right now when you look from Washington. And I said, if you're old enough to remember the Twilight Zone, that kind of feels like where we are right now. But I want to thank each and every one of you for helping us to refocus and to realize that while we can't, to Jeremy's point, maybe affect much change in Washington, there's a lot we can do right here while it's still a democracy to affect change here. So thank you for bringing your perspective, your expertise, and just your love for what you do, because your passion has now been infused into us, and we are so very grateful. So let's just give our panelists another round of applause. All right, and I definitely want to talk to you about that resilience hub thing. That sounds really interesting to me. Tovis?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think hearing about this reminds us of what. I think hearing about these local things reminds us of why we are county focused, because there's so, as we've learned before in prior years, that a lot of funding goes through counties, and we have a bigger impact on a county level because we're bigger fish in a smaller pond. As faith leaders, we can have more impact. So it's a really important way for us to remind our congregants and our communities about these organizations. It's, we're all super busy. It's the expectation isn't that we're all going to do all this work, but we can be conduits and connect our congregants and other people we work with to these organizations. I know a lot of us are getting questions from people saying, what can I do? They're freaking out. They don't know what to do. We have to learn where to direct them, right, to our partner organizations. So I think that's one of the other things here, not to assume we're going to all do all the work, but being conduits and connecting and convening and holding up the voices. That's what we want to keep in mind. So thank you again, panelists. So on that note, you probably saw that we are reviving our network, which is so we have the cohort, which is faith leaders, but then we have this broader network, which is really anybody who wants to join our email list. And so you've all seen that on my emails. You can sign a Google form to get added to that wider list. That would be for faith leaders who can't commit to our monthly meetings, but still want to be apprised of some of our wider events can sign up for that, or congregants, community organizations, that kind of thing. So if there's some larger event, like when we did our Martin Luther King Day action, we would send that out through that email list. So that's another way that we're trying to network and be conveners. The working groups, the immigration justice subgroup is now meeting monthly, and asked if we could have a Google folder to start sharing resources and things like how our congregations are learning, to put up private space signs and all the things we're all having to learn how to do right now in this moment. So I did create a Google folder for that group. If your subgroups want one, let me know, and I can create a Google folder for you as well. And then depending on how that all works, we can share those folders for everybody so that you can see what did the immigration subgroup put together, what resources are there for my congregation. I just wanted to say we did invite the Pride Center to come today. They couldn't come today, but they did send Shawnee, who we all remember hopefully from the trans panel we had, sent some resources here, but I'm going to email them out for Trans Week of Visibility. But I'll also email some of those resources to share with your congregations. And similarly with Faith in Action, they are asking folks to sign up to be rapid response verifiers, and I've included that in the email too. Please, if congregants want to do something locally, they can be trained to be verifiers when calls from in the hotline, and go check it out and see what's happening, and video the interaction with ICE or what have you. Please keep sharing the yellow posters and cards. You can get them from Faith in Action that have the hotline number. There's one in the window right over these two. And put them up, please, in your congregations or hand them out. And lastly, the fund, the Faith in Action's fund, which is trying to get money to help folks who are in detention, families, that kind of thing, critical funds, so we can ask our congregations to contribute to that. And then Penny, you're going to talk about the housing. And let me just say one more thing about lunch and apologize. Hopefully some of you will be happy about this, but we have pizza for lunch because my Indian food order last night was canceled at like 7 p.m. And I was freaking out, and Penny said pizza, and so that's what we have today.
Yeah, I want to give Tovis a hand, because she had to deal with all that. Because pizza's the only thing you can get for large groups at the last minute, because catering you have to do in advance. Yeah. Pretty good, right? It's not bad. Yeah. So, oh, that's not us. Okay. That's just our whole country backing up. No, just kidding. But we are moving forward with our vision, I loved what Marlon said so much about feeling so down this morning, and then watching the passion and love just exude, and then the hands-on work, and then the call for us to use our platforms to do this. So speaking of which, during the month of May, but particularly focused the weekend of May 16th through 18th, you probably got the email, and I'm going to resend it again in a little bit, to do faith communities across the county doing a faith and housing weekend, which literally means this. It's not going to an event. It's bringing the subject of housing and housing justice into your communities when you meet in your worship service or an educational service. We can bring people there. You're going to have to fight over Jeremy to come and speak. But to really raise the awareness, there's so much going on. And again, housing is, such a basic human right and human need, especially here in our county. We are, as you know, one of the hardest places to live. So please look at that and really consider doing something. Whether it's a personal story. I know a number of you have already told me you're doing that, and it's just wonderful. We were trying to get, how powerful would it be to have 30 congregations talking about housing in the month of May in faith communities? And we can do that. We can help make that happen. I want to reach out to some of you to ask you to connect us to colleagues to help make that happen. So before the pizza gets too cold, we're going to end, and I'm going to ask if we would. I want to thank Sister Joan again for that lovely reflection. I think it might be the first time we've whatever language you use, but prayed as a group in that way. I don't know. I think we've had blessings before, but something was different about that, and I really appreciated being able to just say what was on our heart. And no matter what tradition you're from, I think that works, right? To say what is on your heart. And so I really appreciate that so much, Joan. And you are our elder, and we, some of us are getting closer and closer to being an elder too, but you are our elder, and you are a model of well past retirement, fighting the good fight, and showing up, getting on a bus, going to Sacramento, and dragging her sister nuns along with her. You gotta love that, right? You gotta love that. So anyway, so I'm gonna suggest that we end today by, I've asked Rabbi Moshe to come and lead us one more time in that song. And if we could get in a circle in the best way we can so that we can see each other, that would be lovely.